From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas and Stunning Digital Marketing. In this podcast, I sit down with my good friend, Michelle Frechette, and we talk about disabilities and accessibility. And it's not what you may think. It's more accessibility to spaces and things like that. So grab a drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation that Michelle and I had. This episode of the SDM Show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here today. Today I'm here with my good friend and guest, Michelle Frechette. How are you today, Michelle?
I am great. How are you, Rob? Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Doing well. We were just commenting. We're not that far apart for people who don't know that as the crow flies. And we were just commenting about how wonderful the weather was today as we're recording this episode, right? I mean,
I've got my furnace cranked to 74 right now because I'm shivering in my home office.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. So today I thought we'd do something a little different. Those who don't know, you use a mobility scooter, correct?
I do. Yes, I do.
You've got some challenges, and I think you do really well with those challenges. So you should be commended. And some time ago, you went to WordCamp US, and you wrote an article on Post Status, and you were talking about mobility issues for a number of people, and I think you were talking about them because you want people to be aware,
absolutely.
I think it's really important. So, what kind of challenges did you have at WordCamp US?
Yeah, so the article that you're referencing is called 5 Days Without a Shower. And the first line was, "That smell at WordCamp, that was me." And the reason I approached it with some humor is that if I want people to read an article, starting with accessibility needs at WordCamp US would probably not have enticed people to read it as much as, why was Michelle not showering for 5 days? And the truth of the matter is, I didn't shower for 5 days because I did not have an accessible bathroom in my quote-unquote accessible hotel room. And that was just one of the issues that I, as somebody with mobility issues, faced at WordCamp US. And, there were more things, of course. My very first experience, I pulled up in my Lyft, and right away, it was awesome. My scooter was in the trunk of the car that I had been picked up in. And right away, before I even got my feet out of the car, Topher DeRoja was there going, "Hey, can I help you with anything?" And it was wonderful because, if you're driving a mobility scooter, you're pulling a suitcase behind you, it can get a little bit challenging, especially if you've got your backpack with cameras and laptop and everything like I had. So it does you start to feel like, how are you going to juggle all of the things you have to juggle? And so that was really, really kind, really sweet. I can imagine other people not having had somebody watching out the window and seeing them approach, having that same wonderful experience of having a friend just pop out to help. But because somebody was helping me, it was easy to navigate that front door. The front door of the lobby of this resort that we were at did not have any way to push a button and have an automatic door open up for you. So had I been with a backpack between my knees on the floor of my scooter, pulling a giant suitcase beside me, I would have stopped in front of the door and been like, well, now what? Because these doors had to be opened by hand, and then I would have had to find a way to open it, pull my suitcase, have my backpack, roll myself through. And I thought, oh, this is not boding well. Let's hope it gets better from here. And it didn't really. People were kind. People were the reason that this all worked out, because people in our space are always ready to help and lend a hand. And I will say in a non-invasive way, like, Topher's, if I had said to Topher, no, I got this, he'd have been like, okay, cool. Nobody's like trying to force me to do anything or, grab my stuff without asking and making me feel like, like I'm not in control of my own situation. So I get checked in. Topher's wonderful. He actually followed me with my suitcase to my room to make sure I could get in, get my suitcase situated. A super wonderful person. So then I go back down to the lobby, and I'm just hanging out with people, and I was like, I gotta use the restroom. So I'm like, well, the lobby restroom should be good. There's handicap stalls always. Let's hope, right? In most places. So I went into the restroom and did my business, if you will, and then struggled a little bit to wash my hands because I couldn't really get as close to the sink as I wanted to in a scooter. And then it came time to leave the restroom, and the door opened in, and it was a narrow space. And it took me a couple of minutes to navigate the door and the scooter together in that space and actually make my way out of the bathroom. So yeah, having a bathroom door without a push button or moving both in and out, swinging both directions, made it impossible for me to almost impossible for me to use the bathroom alone. So for the rest of my trip there, if I was using a public bathroom, I did the whole girl thing. Like, hey, anybody want to go to the restroom with me? Not because I wanted to gossip or powder our noses together, but I was like, I need somebody to open the door so I can get out again. So it worked. I made it work, but it was not without its challenges. And I was not the only person. There were at least 2 other people I saw there in wheelchairs. There was at least one other person I saw there who was walking with a cane. And, of my recollection now, I don't know other people who might struggle. I don't know people who have breathing issues and for whom long walks are difficult, but don't walk with an assistive device. But there are lots of ways that people experience disability, and in spaces that are challenging can make you feel unheard, unwanted, othered, outside of the loop. I mean, whatever language you want to use for that, it can absolutely make you feel like you are the lesser citizen in the situation if you don't have easy access to all of these things.
Yeah, so true.
And so, so that was the major issue.
I had a former partner in life who walked with a cane, and that was an ongoing issue. I've had family members who are challenged. And we need to stop thinking about it as just things like wheelchairs. Like, if you've got somebody older in your family, can they open a jar? Can they open a pill bottle? Those are realistic challenges in life sometimes. I was in a Walmart locally. Yes, we have Walmarts in Canada, lots of them. And, I was in there the other day, and there was a lady who was walking with a walker wanting something off a top shelf. And do you think in a Walmart store there was anybody around to help this poor lady?
Yeah.
And I think what people can do is be kind and recognize stuff like that and take the minute and say, would you like some help? Don't impose. Ask and say, would you like help?
For sure.
I would assume for you often restaurants are a challenge, like the way seating is set up and things like that, right?
Yeah, it can be for sure. If I sometimes use a cane if it's a short walk. So some restaurants I can navigate into. Some of them I'm further in the parking lot, or I know that the dining room's deeper. I'll get my scooter out of my trunk, but that's that means I have to have somebody with me because I can't lift all the pieces out of the trunk myself, assemble the scooter because it is in 5 pieces, and then navigate into the restaurant. And when I do, I'm always asking for a table instead of a booth, and I have to find some place to park the scooter because I don't sit in the scooter to eat because that's not comfortable. I'll transfer over to a regular chair, and then try not to be in the way of the service staff and other patrons.
Yeah. And then we've got the problem, and I hate to highlight this one because I've seen it again. Leslie's been through it after having knee surgery, and she
Hmm.
went for a long period of time where she used a cane to get around, and even getting up like 3 steps after surgery could have been challenging.
Hmm.
Some days, depending on the steps, is you get somebody who goes and parks in a disability parking spot who shouldn't be there. And that
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
infuriates me to no end. Like, and I'm sure you've run into that, Michelle.
I have. I try to have a bit of grace about that because
Yeah.
there have been times in the past when I forget to hang my placard. And I do have a right to be there because I have a handicap placard for my car. Um, but if I forget to hang it, I look like the person that you're talking about. So I do try to have a bit of grace about that because sometimes it's just one of those things where you're in a hurry, you forget to hang it on your rearview mirror. It's not good to drive with them hanging from your rearview mirror because it does obscure your vision. So for anybody who says, well, why don't you just leave it there? Because it's not safe. It's not safe to have things hanging
No.
and blocking part of your vision. So I have on occasion. I don't do it often because I have a habit of how I get out of my car now. But when I was first starting to use those, I did forget to put it up once in a while, and I got an angry note on my windshield, and it was justified, of course, because I was not doing what I was supposed to identify myself as somebody who had a right to park there. But I do try to have a little bit of grace with other people, just in case it's something like that. I've also seen, like on TikTok and things, where somebody who has a disability get yelled at. Like they tell stories about getting yelled at for parking in a place because they're not disabled enough. Like one person who was a veteran who had a amputation of their right leg, but they're young. They're in their like 20s or something, 20s, early 30s. And the older woman says, "You shouldn't take that spot. I was going to park there." And they said, "Well, I'm sorry, I got here first, and I do have a right to park here. I am disabled." And she said, "You don't look disabled." And he pulled up his pant leg and showed his titanium leg underneath there. And she said, "Well, you're not disabled enough." Like, well, what does that mean? So like I said, I try to have a little bit of grace when it comes to that kind of thing. If I have to walk into a store and I can't park close, I just don't go. Sometimes all the handicap spots are taken. And usually what that will mean, especially if I'm by myself, I have to walk into like a Walmart, for example, and I'll use one of their writing carts because that's great. You've got that big cart, you can put everything in front of you. But if all of the reserved spaces are taken, then probably all of the writing carts are too. So, but to walk into the store to discover that and then walk back to my car is a lot of walking just to not be able to shop. So if I can't find a spot, I shop a different time.
Yeah. And I think you make a really good point. You talk about what we call hidden disabilities. And, somebody can be asthmatic. And I'll give you an example of that. I'm good now, but I've had days in my past where if you asked me to stand in a line for like a couple hours, it would have been hard because
Yeah.
I went through breathing problems. And people say, "Oh, that's not a disability." Well, it's impeding how you have life. So we got to be really
Yeah.
careful about stuff like that. We got to be careful of people who suffer from chronic pain, for example, and they might get up and walk, but that doesn't mean they're not hurting. And that's what
Right.
people need to understand. They got to be really careful. I have to ask you, did you contact a hotel after your stay and say, this wasn't really a disability bathroom, or did you just kind of let it go?
No, so one of the things was as a result of my registration there at the hotel is the how do we do email that you get afterwards. And so I took the opportunity to list everything out on there and give them an honest rating about how they did from a disability standpoint. Sadly, and not surprisingly, I never heard back and did not get a response from them regarding my concerns, but at least I was able to voice them.
Yeah. You see, where I differ from you is when I write a questionnaire and I don't get a response and I'm expecting one, then Twitter's fair game.
Yeah, that's probably true. But I figure, I had already taken to this whole
Yeah.
to write the whole article on Post Status, and for me, it's not about blasting the hotel as much as my purpose in writing that article and in the subsequent podcasts or tweets that I've done. I said tweets that I've done about it is I really am wanting to see some attention at future WordCamps to make sure that people who have disabilities, people who have allergies, people who have special dietary needs, that they're all paid attention to in a way that allows them to attend those camps and have, if it's not entirely the same experience as full able-bodied, non-allergic, non-special needs people, that it's a whole experience, and that nothing is lacking for them, including myself, of course. And one of the things I can say is that article and the conversations that I've had with people at WordPress and WordCamp staff has already started to affect a change. They have published on make.wordpress.org on the handbook for WordCamp organizers. Now they have a venue accessibility checklist. And there's they shared this with me earlier this week. I did tweet it out. And it's a really great start to letting people who are organizing WordCamps think about the things that I've talked about and that others have said, to make sure that we can make sure that people are having a great experience when they attend WordCamps. And I will say that somebody who is on the team who is touring the facility for WordCamp US 2023 has been in contact with me throughout their time of touring the facility, asking about what about this, to make sure that all the things that they think of as they're there can be answered by somebody who has experiences with disability and with their needs not being met. And so I'm just like, I'm over the moon that this has really come, risen to a point where, I didn't write an article to be complaining. I didn't write an article to lambaste anybody. I'm not raising my voice in a way that's hypercritical. I wrote an article and I've raised my voice about my experiences and putting forth ideas of ways that we can do better as a community, and ways that I'm happy to help, move forward in those things. And so, I just think that things are moving forward in a very positive way, and I'm super, super excited. Also, WordCamp Europe reached out to me and said, loved your article. We are definitely putting things in place for WordCamp Europe next year to make sure that everybody has an amazing experience there too. So it's pretty awesome, actually, that we can have experiences and then we can use those experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, to make sure that going forward we have better experiences. And so I'm super excited about that and very grateful that my voice has been heard.
I think that's really important. It's any of us that know you as well realize that you always publish articles to get constructive change, and you don't just publish them to say, look at me, or you want to be the center of attention. That's just so not your style, Michelle. So
thank you.
I read the article. I said to you at the time I read it, I thought you hit it on the head. I mean, and I think they're doing something really important with WordCamp US is they're reaching out to somebody who experiences all the stuff. And I think, outside of the WordCamp space, I think that's things that certain institutions and certain places should reach out to people with similar experiences to yours and say, hey, how do we make this better? And how can we help you? Like if you want people with disabilities, say, for example, to go to shopping malls, then you got to make it accessible. And that can even be something simple like a 70-year-old who just doesn't have the energy of a 20-year-old, and maybe you need to put some more benches out, something that simple. Yeah. And I know I'm making light of it, but I'm not meaning to. It's just sometimes some of these changes are really subtle changes, not big changes. And I love how you touched the dietary needs problem. I went through a spiel where I did a couple local WordCamps after I was diagnosed as diabetic. And to be quite frank, I was taking my own food with me. It was that bad. Because every food was a donut, a sugar, a this, a that. And at that time, I was on high-level diabetic medication. And I'm like, did anybody not think about people, with dietary restrictions?
Right. And sometimes people think, well, we didn't put sugary donuts out. We put bagels and cream cheese, but bagels are so high carb that it is a sugar. And so you definitely have to have people guiding those experiences. If you've got a dietitian, great. That's awesome. Who understands those things and is part of the planning, that's great. But that doesn't always happen, right? We're all volunteers on these teams. And so giving guidance on how to make sure that everybody has the right experience, a good experience at WordCamp means that you have to ask these questions. You have to include people who can help make those situations and those experiences better.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's simple things like at some WordCamps, they'll put pop out or they'll put water out. And I remember walking into one and say, did you not think to put out any diet pop? Like, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's like...
And they're like, well, we put out water. Okay, great, thanks. I just drink water all the time, and I don't get to have the same experience as everybody else. Yeah, maybe I wanted something with... Water has no caffeine, folks.
Yeah, I know. And after a while,
I'd like to pick me up too, right?
and I do know that you're a bit of a coffee holic, a bit. Right.
Well, so I don't know if you know this, but I'm 54. I just had a birthday, which you know.
Yeah.
So at 54, I started drinking coffee 6 years ago. Like, I went through 48 years of my life thinking coffee smelled wonderful and tasted terrible. And suddenly, I was like, I'm going to try it again. Cream and sugar. I'm probably never going to be a drinking black kind of girl. But so 6 years ago, and now I'm a coffee snob.
Yeah. I am too, and I didn't start, and I'm a year older than you, and I didn't start till 40. So there you go.
There you go, right? So there it is.
And one of the things I do when I was diagnosed, I started at 40, was diagnosed with diabetes at 42, and one of the things I did was I immediately dropped. I put cream in my coffee, but I dropped sugar right out of it, and I just said, I don't need this. Because I can't stand the taste of the sweeteners in it, so I just I don't need that. And I've managed to drink coffee for over 10 years without sweetener in my coffee, if you can believe it.
Well, that's good. I'm not sure I could get there, but maybe someday. But I survive on caramel macchiatos, so I'm just going to say right here and now, if you see me at a WordCamp and you want to think, how can I make Michelle's day better? Starbucks caramel macchiato will make me a happy girl every time.
Yeah. So I think, I think this is all about making the right changes for the right reasons and progressive change, right? And I think we're headed in the right direction. I think, truthfully, the community has heard it. They're concerned. We're lucky in Toronto. The last couple WordCamps we've had from a disability perspective have been in public city buildings. So the advantage of that is all public buildings that are municipal buildings must be scooter and mobility aware. So that kind of helps a little bit.
Yep.
So that there's no question. The only drawback to that is you can't charge for admission to a WordCamp then. But that's another story. Because there is a policy that in city buildings you're not allowed to charge any entrance fee for it, so your sponsors have to pick up the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We've been through some of that, but I mean, I think that's important.
I'll tell you. So I was at WordCamp Montclair last June, and it was my first WordCamp post-apocalypse. Yes, post-pandemic. And I still call it the apocalypse sometimes because it kind of felt that way. But it was, as far as accessibility goes, it was phenomenal. It was at a college, and the entrance doors were all buttons. All the Ubers and Lyfts that I took were, perfectly fine with helping me take apart that scooter, put it back together. The only drawback was that the bathroom didn't have a automatic entrance. Most restrooms don't. And I know that that's not something, I'm never going to say the person who's at WordCamp US scouting right now for the location or looking at the location, she said, I know that's a necessity. I said, it's not a necessity. It's a wish list, because most bathrooms are not going to have that feature. And I don't expect that every single one of my needs will be met, just like nobody gets all 100% of their needs met, no matter how able-bodied you are. So I don't expect that WordCamp is going to cater to me. I just want anybody who's in my situation, who's using a mobility device or who has any accessibility needs at all, whether, like you said, whether it's something that they can't take long walks because of their breathing. That's one of the things is when I was using a cane, and I mentioned this, I think I mentioned this in the article, that like WordCamp US in, where was it? Nashville in Tennessee, the location for lunch was so far away from where the vendor hall was, which is where I was a lot of the time because I was working for Give, and also from where the sessions were, that for somebody with a mobility device that wasn't motorized and wasn't on wheels, it became almost impossible. And the second day I didn't go to lunch because I had so much trouble walking to lunch the first day and back. And so those kinds of things, we just really need to keep in mind that, it's like I can wheel all over the place now as long as I can keep charging my battery wherever I need to. So I can go half a mile to get to lunch. That's not a problem. But that doesn't help my friends who are slow walkers because of breathing or using a cane because of a knee issue or, anything like that. So we need to also, it's not just about mobility devices, like you said, it's about disability needs overall and making sure that any venue is able to be accessible by all people, whatever their needs are.
Yeah, it was one of the things you and I were talking about that kind of spearhead this whole conversation. We were talking about one of our favorite places, Niagara Falls, and we were talking about this new tunnel by the power plant, which I have not been in yet. And you said to me, "Is it accessible?" And I reached out to a friend of mine who's been there. He was part of one of the focus groups when they designed it, and he said, "Yeah, it is, but it's a bit of a walk." But what they did, knowing it was a bit of a walk, was they put extra benches on the walking path. So that's the only thing. Unfortunately, the nature of where it is it is a bit of a walk. So you might, if you've got a breathing issue or you're elderly, you might have a problem with that. But at least they've put the benches in and tried to accommodate it that way. And that's, I think that's a step in the right direction when people do that and they say,
absolutely. Tell you what, my local zoo here in Rochester, the Seneca Park Zoo, it is very, like most zoos are as they've grown, very, expansive. So there's a lot of walking involved if you don't have a scooter or something and you have issues with walking distances. 2 years ago when I looked at going to the zoo, because I take, I'm a photographer and I love taking pictures of the animals and everything. I looked to see it, this before I had a scooter, looked to see if they had anything like that there, and they did not, but they do now. And so I was at the zoo recently to take pictures, and I went with some friends who helped me get my scooter in and out of the car, and we used my scooter, of course. But as I was driving, scrolling past, or strolling, or whatever you would call it, past the main area, I looked to the left and there was scooter rental available. So, and stroller rental too, for people who don't have strollers with them. So it's good that public places like that are really taking into account not only that have benches and things like that, but some places that are really expansive like that even take into account. And it's not free, and I don't expect things to be free. But, to even, $15, $20 for a day rental on a scooter like that, to be able to see the zoo, like, especially if you, like you said, you don't own one because maybe you had knee surgery or you don't go out that often and you want to go with your grandkids to the zoo or something, are providing ways for more family members to be able to be involved in those activities regardless of their disability needs. So I think that's pretty cool.
A place that does it really well here is the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto. They have They have a relationship with the Boy Scouts of Canada, and the Boy Scouts actually staff the wheelchair and walker rentals, and they rent them by the day.
I'll tell you, my worst experience in Canada was the CN Tower.
Oh,
when
yes.
I was there for WordCamp Toronto, not the last one that happened, but the one prior to that.
Mm.
So we're talking maybe 5 years ago now. And I was still walking, not even with a cane yet, but I had trouble walking long distances or standing for long periods of time. And I took my intern there on our way home, and I didn't realize we were going to have to stand in line for over an hour. And at some point I was shifting foot to foot, and finally he saw some steps and he's like, I'll hold our place in line. You go sit in those steps. And so I went and sat on the steps, and it was the only thing that let me not have to leave having paid the money to be able to actually go up and see it, because there was no benches. There was no way, no place for people with, with stamina issues to be able to participate. So I hope that's changed. I don't know. It's been quite a few years now.
It has, actually. They've put more
Good.
benches down there. So.
Oh, perfect. That's great. I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, it's just a mess. And then you've got the whole issue, if you go to a sporting event and things like that, and sporting events are hard. I think in some places they try, but they could do better. I think sporting events, certainly in Canada, have been pretty good about putting in accessible washrooms, which helps. But I mean, definitely. I think there's other things they could do better, personally. But counter height's a big deal.
It is, absolutely.
Anyway,
it is.
I really appreciate you jumping on and having a conversation.
Yeah,
if somebody
course.
wants to get a hold of you to have it more, what's the best way? Twitter, I would assume?
Twitter's good. The best way to find all the ways to get in touch with me is meetmichelle.online. You get links to all of my social media. You get email. You can fill in a form. It's the best way to find anything to do with me.
Thanks, Michelle. Have an awesome day.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This episode of the SDM Show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. A very special thank you to Michelle for joining me on this edition of the SDM Show. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.